Now, one very important person we haven't yet mentioned is Ian Stewart. He's important because when the Rolling Stones were first formed, there were 6 members, not just the 5 who were known later. Ian explains how he got involved.
Well, from my point of view, the group started with Brian, really, in that he was the first one I met. And he had put an advert in the Jazz News saying that he wanted to start an R&B group. And he was trying to get a group together in a pub in Lisle Street. And there was only him and a couple other guys. He didn't like the piano player he'd got, so I just started playing piano and we went through different people. But then this was at a time when the thing in Ealing was starting and the Marquee thing with Alexis was starting. And of course Brian knew Alexis, and so therefore he got to know Mick and Charlie. So what eventually we did, we had this group with Mick and Keith, and they brought Dick Taylor and Brian, and then it just used to be a case of any drummer we could find. But we didn't really play in public at all. In fact, we sometimes went weeks without playing because, you know, that didn't seem to be getting anywhere, and Brian would get pissed off with it and vanish. So eventually we sort of thought about starting clubs ourselves, you know, in pubs the way the jazz clubs were at the time. And so we had one here in Sutton, and we didn't really get Charlie with us permanently for a long time because he was playing with another group that was making money and Charlie needed the money, so we must have used about 8 or 9 different drummers. Andrew Oldham was a publicity man, and he was very conscious of producing a Beatle-type pop group, although without actually changing the music too much. I mean, he sort of admitted that he knew nothing about music, but he wanted to cut the group down to 5 people. I mean, I was much older than them. I didn't like long hair. I've never had my hair long. And also, you've got to own up the fact that I'm a rotten piano player. The only thing I regret about it is if I'd stuck to it, I'd probably been quite a good piano player now if I'd forced myself to do it, but I was not a good piano player then. And I didn't really like the way Andrew steered the group. And in fact, if he'd have stuck to his publicity thing, which he was brilliant at, I think he's very responsible for what they eventually achieved, and kept his nose out of the music, they might have been better today, actually.
But in 1969 there were bigger problems. What had once been a split between Brian and the rest of the group was rapidly becoming a yawning chasm. Ian Stewart, who'd started on piano with Brian in the original group, explains how he saw it.
Brian had been making me feel pretty bad for a long time because he wasn't really thinking too much about playing. He seemed to be bitter about various things, and when I first met him, he was you know, a really nice guitar player who could play various styles. He still felt he was leader of the group for a couple of years after it started, and he used to be a bit bitter under the surface that Mick was the leader of the group, not him, and the fact that you know, they were recording all Mick and Keith's songs. I mean, Brian was incapable of writing music, and so I'm not really quite sure what else he wanted them to do. And then he rather lost interest in guitar playing whatsoever. He did break his wrist one time in Africa, and from then on he just didn't want to play guitar. He played soprano sax on a Beatles B-side, but he just seemed to lose all heart, and he was talking about leaving anyway. So I mean, I wasn't surprised. I didn't really feel particularly bad about it because he was potentially brilliant and a very, very intelligent person, but he just seemed to be set on destroying himself.
So Brian was out, and his replacement in the group was 20-year-old Mick Taylor. Ian Stewart approved of this choice.
Well, if I didn't like him, I wouldn't have got him. I never get any credit for doing anything in this band, but it was me that rather got Mick Taylor in this. I mean, there wasn't really very many choices. It was going to be him, and my other choice was Ronnie Wood at the time. But the Faces had been, you know, really down and doing nothing, and they were just starting to look up again with Ronnie Wood's playing with them, and so he doesn't know about this actually, but So Ronnie Lane said, "Oh, for Christ's sake, don't pinch him. He's, we need him," sort of thing. And so I then thought about Mick Taylor, and Jagger didn't even realise who he was. He was thinking he was somebody else. But